Today I will show you the most important matrix feature for controller players that isn't aim related. It is of course also very useful for mouse users, but for controller players it is more or less mandatory when starting to use more complex XIM setups. The main problem controller users face when using complex setups is that they don't have enough buttons to place all actions on. Usually all controller buttons are already assigned by the game to specific in-game actions. That, however, leaves no space for other matrix features anymore, such as smart actions. I mean, how do you want to bind a smart action if you have no more buttons left on the controller? You must either sacrifice an in-game action or bind the smart action to a button that will unintentionally also cause an action in the game. If you don't know what I mean, then don't worry. Here is an example. By the way, the setup is the same for mouse and keyboard players. Let's say you want to play your favorite shooter, and this here is your ideal setup. Let me go through the bindings to give you a better idea. As you can see, we have two anti-recoil setups, one for weapon 1 and the other one for weapon 2. And at the bottom we have two buttons to load these anti-recoil setups. The square button loads recoil 1 and deactivates recoil 2, and the triangle button does it the other way round, so it activates recoil 2 and deactivates recoil 1. The problem now is that in most shooters the square button will also be used for reloading, and triangle for switching weapons. But my two recoil bindings overwrote these, so I cannot reload or switch my weapon anymore because those two will instead load the recoil profiles. As you can see on the right side, I press those buttons but nothing happens in the game. Instead they load my recoil profiles. To solve that, I must bind reload and switch weapons to other buttons on the controller. These buttons will then, however, also overwrite their original action. So I end up in a spiral where I must either rearrange everything or sacrifice two actions in the game. And this is just with two bindings. More complex configurations often have 30 to 40 bindings, so this approach is not practical. Now to fix this we have two options. The first one is to connect a keyboard to your XIM and bind those extra actions to the keyboard. As a controller player that is very annoying. The much smarter solution is to use modifiers, and that is what I will show you now. Scroll down to the modifier tab and open it. You will need to activate the advanced mode in your configuration to access this feature. In this menu you can define 3 modifiers. By default, the D-pad is used. You can click on each modifier to change them to your favorite buttons. I will keep them as they are and not change them. Let's focus on the modifier on the right side, the D-pad left button. For demonstration purposes, I will pick that one. Once I am done with the setup and press this button, my XIM will switch into a brand new controller layout. That way I can bind any button on my controller another time. And in this layout, none of the controller buttons are auto-assigned, so pressing triangle will not switch my weapon. This is because I have selected exclude at the bottom. If I want the auto bindings to carry over, then I can switch it to include. Both have their advantages, but personally I prefer exclude. Furthermore, that layout will only be active while I hold down this modifier, and each of these modifiers let me switch into a different layout. I will start with the setup now so you can better understand it. I will start by assigning the modifier to one of my recoil bindings. For that, I open the binding and then click into the picture at the top. This will load the modifier assignment. I can now select which modifier I want to tie to this binding, or in other words, which of my 3 new controller layouts this binding should belong to. As I said earlier, I will use the D-pad left button. Once this is done, you can see it as a tiny icon in the top left corner. Let me leave this menu. When I now hold down my modifier, you can see that this recoil binding becomes accessible. And when I press my triangle button while holding down the modifier, I can load the right recoil profile. As you can see in the game, my weapon is not being switched. And when I let go of my modifier, the recoil binding is grayed out again, and I can press triangle to switch my weapon without the recoil profile to get activated. This is because my XIM no longer overwrites the triangle binding. Since I have moved the recoil binding to the modifier, it won't overwrite the regular controller layout anymore. As a result, I can switch weapons with triangle again. So by using modifiers, I have now 2 different actions on triangle that I can activate separately. Or in other words, modifiers allow you to have different actions on the same button, while also being able to access them individually. I will now assign my modifier to the other binding as well. While I do that, here is one important thing. Once you tie a modifier to a binding, this modifier will no longer trigger its original action in the game. So whatever action my game was performing when pressing my D-pad left button, that action will no longer be activated when I press that button. This is done by the XIM to avoid unintended in-game actions when using a modifier. As you can see, when I press my modifier, the firing mode of my gun will no longer change. Instead, the binding assigned to the modifier will briefly light up as it becomes accessible. So as a result, I must fix that by creating a replacement binding. The next step is therefore to create a new binding. You can pick any button that isn't your modifier. I will select the X button on my controller. Next, I will bind the D-pad left action to it. This is the action I must reintroduce because my modifier overrode it. And then at the top, I will assign the modifier to it. Let me leave this menu. When I now hold down my modifier, I can access the original action of the modifier by pressing my X button. And I can of course also access all other bindings that I have assigned to this modifier. So in short, a modifier will allow you to swap into a new controller layout. But since your modifier button loses its original purpose in the game, you must reintroduce it by binding it to another button in your new layout. You can of course fully customize your new controller layout with new bindings such as your favorite smart actions or other things. And when you want to switch back into your normal layout, you just stop pressing your modifier. Since complex configuration setups usually have 30 to 40 different bindings, it is often mandatory to use at least 1 or 2 modifiers. The best modifiers are of course those that you can press while keeping your thumbs on the sticks.
So guys, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button or maybe even subscribe to this channel to not miss out on any of the upcoming videos. Also, contrary to popular belief, this channel is not an official XIM channel. I run this channel in my free time to bring you guys the latest XIM news and tricks. So if you want to support what I do, then maybe consider to join the YouTube channel membership. Channel members usually get around 1 to 4 weeks of early access to all new videos. Plus, we also have a nice little Discord to discuss XIM settings and other stuff. But that's about it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching and I will maybe see you in the next one.